So good afternoon, everyone. Dear guests and respected panelists, thank you for accepting the invitation to be part of this event. Today's online regional panel discussion is part of the project Disinformation and Russia Aggressions Against Ukraine, Threats, Implications, and How to Counter False and Misleading Content in the Western Balkans, with a focus on North Macedonia, which NEXUS Civil Concept is implementing with the support of the NATO's Public Diplomacy Division. The main goal of this project is to support joint efforts to combat misinformation, disinformation, and propaganda caused by the war in Ukraine, as well as to raise public awareness to reduce the influence of Russian propaganda in Western Balkans. Within this project, 5 audio podcasts were recorded, which are currently published on our social media. We developed a brochure with a brief overview of the key milestones on our country's journey to NATO, as a follow-up to the documentary we produced last year. As the last activity within this project is today's online regional panel discussion, which will be with honored panelists from Albania, Montenegro, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Serbia, and North Macedonia, where each representative will speak on this topic, but with a focus on the country they come from. We are especially glad that this event will be enriched by the address of NATO's Assistant Secretary General for Public Diplomacy, Ms. Marie-Doha Besancenot. Dear participants, the Western Balkan society, in addition to the challenges it faces in terms of the rule of law and dealing with corruption, due to the low awareness and security culture, is increasingly exposed to media propaganda coming from authoritarian regimes. Russian propaganda in the wider region of the Western Balkans has been strongly present in the past 10 years, but with the start of the invasion of Ukraine, it got an aggressive approach with a regional dimension. Due to the weak institutional resistance to the influx of disinformation, misinformation, and spins, the Western Balkan society is vulnerable and easily prone to external influences and internal polarization, which aims to create confusion and mistrust toward the governments, towards Western values, and in increasing Euroscepticism. I hope that the panel discussion will attract your attention. We will have an interesting and fruitful debate. We will draw positive conclusions, and we will have a positive influence in raising public awareness of this important issue. I would like to thank the respected panelists for their participation and contribution in today's debate. Dear guests, thank you for your interest, and we hope that you will hear interesting things and maybe join the debate. Now, let's hear Ms. Marie-Doha Besancenot to address.
Thank you very much for your kind invitation. I'm very honored to be addressing you today in my first month as NATO Assistant Secretary General for Public Diplomacy. My division, NATO's Public Diplomacy Division, has a long-lasting relationship with your institution, and we deeply value this cooperation. Your session today comes at a critical time on a critical topic. Russia's brutal war of aggression against Ukraine has brought death and destruction to the heart of Europe. But it also sweeps an incredible amount of untruths and lies, extending the battle of narratives more broadly, including in North Macedonia and in the Western Balkans. The recent NATO summit in Vilnius this summer was an unprecedented display of allied unity. Important decisions were taken. First, to strengthen our own deterrence and defense, and ensure we are ready to defend every inch of NATO territory. Second, to step up our support to Ukraine. And third, to strengthen NATO partnerships as we deal with other challenges to our security, and not least, the ongoing threat of terrorism. Moreover, the summit made clear that strategic communications and the battle against misinformation and disinformation is core NATO business. We communicators, we operate in an information space that can be described in three phrases. First, it's a very loud and contested space. Two, it's algorithm-driven. It's ruled by targeting mechanisms which really overpower the free play of opinions. And three, it's massively destabilized by deceitful messaging, which are supported by heavy chatbot activity. These are really challenging dynamics, and they demand innovative responses from NATO and from all the institutions and governments confronted with the same disinformation threats. So what do we do? Effective storytelling about NATO and the positive role it plays in the day-to-day lives of the people we represent is important. We also need to get creative about the platforms that we use to engage with new messengers and influencers to reach audiences where they are. And we also need data-based messaging campaigns to ensure we understand our audiences and tailor the messages to ensure they're effective. So NATO's Public Diplomacy Division is working on all this. What is also crucial to us is partnering with organizations like you, NEXUS Civil Concept, with local experts in tune with local audiences, driving attention to the problems, and helping shape the solutions. So thank you for your work.
So this was the addressing by the Assistant Secretary General. And now I give the floor to respected Professor Nenad Markovic to lead us through the discussion. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Afrodita. I really enjoy being the moderator of such distinguished panelists, and I hope we have a very fruitful discussion. But before that, I would like to introduce myself and simply go over the agenda, of course, what is expected today, and maybe a little bit give an introduction in terms of the situation in North Macedonia, which we discussed just a few days ago at a debate organized here in Skopje. We discussed the landscape, we discussed the current situation, and we discussed both wars, the real one, the actual one, and the informative one, the communicative one, that is currently going on. So my name is Nenad Markovic. I'm a professor of political science. That's a department under the law faculty in Skopje, under University St. Cyril and Methodius, which is the oldest and biggest state university. I'm a member of several think tanks and also acting member of the National Security Council. That's an advisory body to President Pendarovski in a constitutional category. In this regard, I would just like to say that today's panel is pretty much connected by one motif, and that, as the title informs us, is Disinformation and Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, Trends, Implications, and how to counteract false and misleading content in Western Balkans, which is high on the priority list for, let's say, for our government, our ministries, and generally in the region. After my short, I would say more intervention than a speech, the first speaker is, of course, we start with the ladies, Dr. Lady Dervishi from the International Relations and Senior Security Consultant from Albania, with the topic Russia's influence as an external factor in the Western Balkans, disinformation and propaganda in Albania. After that, we have Mr. Nikola Petrovic, Director at International Security Affairs Center from Serbia, reasons for the success of Russian propaganda in Western Balkans and wider. The third discussant is Mr. Irvin Pekmez, journalist at Balkan Investigative Reporting Network, BIRN, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Russia's disinformation and invasion on Ukraine through lens of Bosnian war and contemporary challenges. And the fourth speaker is Marko Banovic, Digital Forensic Center of the Atlantic Council of Montenegro, Russian propaganda channels in Montenegro. What we discussed the other day seems to be resembling a lot what Mr. Petrovic will speak about, or what I spoke about just a few days ago at the local conference. I was speaking more, not just the reasons for the success of the propaganda in North Macedonia, of the Russian propaganda, but in general, the predisposition of vast, I would say, proportion of the population to believe Russian arguments. And I always want to go a little bit deeper into the matter, especially targeting young people, because in that young formative period, it's important how opinions are shaped, how critical attitudes are shaped, how understanding the worldview in general is shaped. And I remember one of the panelists, Dean Dujovsky from the Faculty of Security, said that maybe even more than half of his students approve of what Russia is doing currently in Ukraine, which was kind of terrifying at the same time and fascinating how it can happen actually. I found the answer in between the lines, not in between the lines, but pretty directly in several factors. And I will just try to sum them up so we can give the panelists more time. For instance, in North Macedonia, as you might know or not know, North Macedonia is the lowest country ranking in media literacy, for instance, which is one of the critical factors for combating fake news. Then it has one of the worst scores in the PISA tests, which are the tests that show you educational efficiency and proficiency of the students. Just to sum it up, an average Macedonian student knows only 65% of what an average Finnish or Estonian students know. Of course, most of the countries in the Balkans are there at the bottom, both for media literacy and the PISA tests. And the third one, which is probably also the same in the region, I haven't seen any comparative research, is the proneness to believing in theories of conspiracy theories. Working on a unrelated publication, I wanted to see, and I asked for the cross tabulations by age groups to see how different age groups react to theories of conspiracy or conspiracy theories. And you probably guess that younger people have absolutely the same, if not bigger, predisposition to conspiracy theories in North Macedonia, regardless of belonging to ethnic group, religion, etc., etc. So it's a kind of a worrying situation that creates the prerequisites for any propaganda penetrating and leaving its mark or leaving its influence. That's where I'll finish. I will be probably making just small interventions after every discussion. I won't be having a expose, so to say, a longer expose on my side. I would like to give the floor to Dr. Lady Dervishi. Russia's influence as an external factor in the Western Balkans, disinformation and propaganda in Albania. I would like to see and to hear how the situation is in Albania. But first, I would like to introduce our first speaker. Lady Dervish is the former head of cabinet of the state minister and chief negotiator for the integration of Albania to the EU, close to the Prime Minister's office. In her previous capacity, she has contributed as advisor to the Minister of Interior of the government of Albania. In June 2022, she ended up her mission at National PCV-ERLT coordinator, executive director of the National Coordination Center for Countering Violent Extremism, close to the Prime Minister's office. And I wouldn't be reading, it's a kind of a long and very rich CV. Ms. Dervishi, I will stop there. And if you want to add something on your biography, please do. I'm eager to hear how is the situation in Albania vis-a-vis the topic we have today. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Markovic. It is really a pleasure to be here with you. I don't know if you listen to me well. I believe so. Okay, perfect. First of all, allow me, because I'm really grateful to NEXUS Civil Concept and to the NATO Public Diplomacy Division that gives us professionals the possibility to come up all together and talk about this important issue. Thank you for reading, let's say, the full background. I don't think that there is anything more to add than the fact that in this field, you always find yourself a researcher. I mean, if you want to be a professional, you always have to learn on disinformation, on propaganda, and on everything that has to do with hybrid tools and hybrid ideologies that our century is looking forward and is facing somehow as a challenge. I would like to start very shortly with the kind of premise on the Western Balkans. Since I have been dealing for a very, in the last years, also on regional cooperation, and in particular on security, I might say that the Russian propaganda is not a new news, that the influence of the Russian propaganda is very widely spread in the Western Balkans. And when I talk about the Western Balkans, this means that the presence of Russia, it's not by case there. The Russian foreign policy is a product of strategic culture. Let's call it like that. So Russia has always wanted to have its own saying in the Western Balkans. And these, let's take also the example of Albania. You know that during the communist era in 1950s, because of the good relationship of the former Republic Communist of Albania with Russia at that time, also a naval base was, let's say, established in Lora, and they left in 1961 for ideological, let's say, diversities. So let's say that this is not a new reality in Albania. Of course, now we are talking about totally different relationship. And when we talk about the Russian propaganda and disinformation in the Western Balkans, not every country has experienced the same thing. Let's say that this foreign-minded influence, if you agree with me, and different countries in the Western Balkans agree with this, let's say, definition. It is not only of Russia, because external factors usually include Russia, China, Turkey, sometimes, very rarely, Middle Eastern countries, which have, let's say, their own agenda on the Western Balkans. But since we are talking today on disinformation, let's say that since the conflict in Ukraine started in 2014 and it was made known to the wider public, this aggression brought also a very huge amount of propaganda, not only in the Western Balkans, but in Europe, in all over the world, and also in the MENA region. Of course, this influence and these disinformations find somehow ground-based in the political instability, in the weak institutions, and sometimes also in the credibility of the European accession process in some of the countries in the Western Balkans. Of course, these, if we consider also the COVID pandemic and also the energy security crisis that has, let's say, somehow touched also the Western Balkans, you would agree with me that these factors are really important in order for Russia to put a kind of hybrid, let's say, strategy in the Western Balkans. And this strategy is based in disinformation, in propaganda, in fake news, and in manipulation. Sometimes we have seen from OSINT sources also in the web, but also from, let's say, sources which are very credible, nexus between terrorist networks, organized crimes, and corruption, which use this kind of propaganda and this disinformation in order to allow, let's say, external factors to enter in the internal and domestic policies of the countries of the Western Balkans. Now, of course, every country is different from one another, because I heard that our former speaker from the NATO Diplomacy Division, esteemed one, spoke about North Macedonia and the impact that this disinformation has had. At the same time, this disinformation has had a short-term, let's say, impact also in Kosovo. But let's not forget what happened in Montenegro not a very long period ago on the, let's say, interference using religious and ethnical background and let's say their connections on domestic and governance policies. And if we go to Albania, we must say that although the perception of the Albanian citizens is somehow high on the security threat that Russia poses in Albania, we must say that this perception has not to be, let's say, overestimated, because in Albania, we must consider the fact that according to the figures of the Albanian Barometer of 2022, for the Albanian citizens, about half think that Russia poses a very large threat or a large threat to Albanian security. But let's say that on the other hand, Russia is perceived to pose a large or very large security threat to the Balkan region by nearly 2/3 of the respondents that have taken part of the security barometer of Albania in 2022. And if we consider this figure, we know that this is an important figure. And being questioned, the Albanian citizens, on how Russia did impact the Albanian, let's say, policies, government, public opinion, communities, usually they connect it with two different, or let's say two connected areas. That means economics and energy. So these are, let's say, the two main topics which Albanian citizens see where Russia can be, let's say, the main influencers also in Albania. Of course, we know that Russia has tried to influence the Western Balkans by using foreign trade investments, by using commercial and political ties, by using also religious ties in the case of Serbia, but also we know that also other realities in the region. But I think that this cannot be overestimated. Of course, it remains a concern, but considering that the EU is giving such a huge support to the Western Balkans with a very robust economic plan in order to recover from the COVID post-pandemic and in order to counter disinformation by also enhancing capacities of professionals which deliver information in our countries, I think that this information is being tackled at a very good level. Of course, it's not very easy to understand Russia's policy and Russia's strategy in the Western Balkans, because we know that in some countries like Syria or other countries, Russia has its own interest. In Serbia, it has its own interest. And also in Montenegro has had its own interest. Let's not forget what happened in North Macedonia. But in Albania, this kind of disinformation has been, let's say, very limited, and it has been reflected on the outlet of the online media. And let's say that I'm calling it outlets online media because sometimes this online media cannot be controlled. And you know better than me that for cyber issues, IPs are found outside of the boundaries of the Albanian territory. And they use this online media through sensationalist reporting. And according to a EU study that has mapped somehow disinformation in the Western Balkans from 2018 to 2020, we must say that it has been commercially oriented disinformation produced for disseminating political purposes. So let's say that political parties somehow has used these channels of online media outlets for purposes that were keen to them in order to take advantage for political gains. Is this a long-term policy in Albania? Thanks God, up to now, it has not been resulting in a long-term policy. Sometimes these disinformation campaigns are very short-term, very well-oriented. They have a strategic topic and a strategic objective that, let's say, is limited to a certain amount of time and to a certain period where something happened that has political ties. Of course, Albania has tried to somehow protect itself by promoting, let's say, a regulatory framework in countering disinformation. And I would mention here in 2019, the package of anti-dissemination that was passed in the parliament. Of course, these kind of measures are not enough, and sometimes they might be considered restrictive to the free speech of the online medias. But what it has been observed by the Council of Europe and other interlocutors, but also European Union, is the fact that this is based on a very low capacity building and technical capacities of professionals that deal with socio-economic issues that produce and deliver information in journalism area. Of course, we are talking about 2018-2020, and now we are in 2023, and the situation has changed because a lot has been done to train journalists, professionals, but also publicists. And we are not in the same position. But I think that this is a very difficult challenge because to counter disinformation, you have to do fact-checking. To do fact-checking, you need professionals. To do fact-checking, you need economical resources. And sometimes economical resources comes from foreign malign influences, because the state, for several reasons, for not interference, for political reasons, but also for, let's say, unbiased and laicity reasons, cannot intervene in the, let's say, online or physical media. I could say a lot of different other things on the issue, but if I would go to a figure, for example, when the Albanian citizens have been asked, according to the Balkan Security Barometer, and in particular to the Albanian one, to what extent does Russia's action on Ukraine pose a security threat to the Balkans? Only 21% have responded that a very large threat, and 50% a big threat. This shows that the Albanian perception of the war in Ukraine and on the impact of Russia's disinformation is really important in the perception of the Albanian citizenship, while the one of China is perceived at 19%. But let's not forget that in 2022, Russia itself distributed information on the, this can be fact-checked on OSINT information, that Albanian-speaking mercenaries were going to fight for Russia against the Ukraine in this war. And this resulted in fake news. So by using this kind of disinformation, Russia trying to get advantage in order to convince the public opinion that is Albanian speaking, but even largely talking about the Western Balkans, that Western Balkans back up this Russian aggression, which is not true. And the fact is that the Albanian citizenship and also the Western Balkans has given a name to this aggression, and the aggressor has been Russia. If I would conclude and say that since we are here between professionals, I think that every one of us has followed the Security Council meeting lately at the General Assembly of the United Nations, and the discussion has been very vivid. But it has been very clear, and the Albanian government, which has the Albanian presidency of the Security Council, along with other partners of Europe and other partners in the world, has given a name to this aggression by saying that as long as this war continues, Russia wants to withdraw the attention from herself by opening hybrid threats everywhere in the world, like in the Western Balkans, in order to keep away the Euro-Atlantic aggression. And for this reason, I think that the government of the Western Balkans should be bound together in a very outlined and, let's say, outlined foreign policy. And almost all the Western Balkans countries have made their own choice. And unless some countries like Serbia, for example, if we consider in the last news that are going on the web and the conflict in Kosovo lately, which is not very clear which is the direction of Serbia in this regard. Disinformation.
Wrap up, please?
Yes, disinformation is something that takes leverage on a very low knowledge on the community, on our societies, when we talk about social economic issues. So if we raise public awareness, if we robust our foreign policies, and if we, let's say, give space to the European Union to counter disinformation, but also doing it internally and nationally, I think that the Russian disinformation with the passing of time, although might be a robust one, does not consist in a very important security, let's say, concern, at least for Albania. I cannot say the same for all the Western Balkan countries. Thank you for the moment, and hope to have been as concrete as possible, and I will be here if you have any other question to develop.
Thank you, Ms. Dervishi. It was really an interesting presentation in terms that, yes, what you said, the last few sentences are rather important. There is a huge discrepancy in the societies in the Western Balkans or in Southeast Europe, as it is euphemistically called, in terms of whether people perceive the Russian threat or how they perceive the Russian threat, or in general, do they agree or do they approve of the reasons that Russia posts through its propaganda. North Macedonia is a specific example. Just the other day, I found out that the two embassies that were most engaged in the region in terms of tweeting, using social networks, and generally being engaged in propaganda were the Russian embassies in Romania and North Macedonia. The Russian embassy in North Macedonia has doubled the tweets as the next one. I forgot whether that was the EU, whether that was a specific country of the EU or the US embassy, but just the sole fact that it has doubled the tweets, for instance, on different topics tells you that they are pretty much engaged. And I think that the social networks are the main nest, I would say, of disinformation, not so much television and other outlets. I said in the beginning that I'm very interested in Mr. Petrovic's presentation, because I have I would say, most focused interest in this, exactly why propaganda will be there, but I want to know what are the reasons why it succeeds. So without further ado, I would give the floor to Mr. Nikola Petrovic, Director at International Security Affairs Center, ISAC from Serbia, to see whether and how this propaganda works, functions, and most importantly, why. Mr. Petrovic, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor Kovic. And first of all, I would like to thank Nexus for this opportunity. And it is hard to talk after such a overwhelming introduction of a previous speaker, especially Mrs. Rishi, which has most of what I would like to talk about. And it's always a pleasure to be representative from Serbia, because our researches in especially past few years have shown that Serbia is not just the receiver of for especially the one coming from Russia. And since the beginning of the war in Ukraine, Serbia has been a hub for further dissemination, especially for regional disinformation campaigns of Russian Federation in Western Balkans. Now, Serbia is a very fertile ground for disinformation campaigns, for all the reasons Prof. Markovic mentioned in his opening remarks, that have to do basically the way how we perceive information and our level of literacy, both academic literacy and media literacy, which is very low in the entire Western Balkans, but especially as Professor Markovic said, in North Macedonia and in Serbia. Excuse me. Now the reasons why Russian propaganda is so successful are tied for basically two lines of thought. The first one being tied to a simple way how information is being successful. That's what its major three pillars are. How are they working? The major three pillars for disseminating information are, of course.
Mr. Petrovic, sorry to interrupt you. Some of the participants are writing to me that they cannot hear you very well. Can you turn off the camera, or is it already turned off? Because your network bandwidth is low. Just let the audio and then yeah. Please continue. Sorry for the interruption.
Okay. No problem. I do apologize for my bad network. That happens on Tuesdays. So as I was saying, information disinformation is dependent on three major conditions. The first, of course, is a monetary issue, meaning how much money is being put in campaign. And it's very interesting to find out that since COVID pandemic started, we had Western companies, Western conglomerates, basically supporting pro-Russian media. Why? Because their PR agencies were not looking into politics. They were looking present companies they were presenting in areas that have most influence or most amount of clicks. Those were often pro-Russian media. So we have a situation where pro-Russian media were basically funded by Western big companies, which use those sites, those media for promotion of their products. The second, which is very crucial for Western Balkans, and especially in Serbia, is political will. If you have a situation where politicians support disinformation campaigns, then they will have any other information campaigns, they will get bigger reach and they will have big impact. Unfortunately, the case in Serbia is that our own political elites, not just the current ones, but for a very long period of time, stemming from the days of communism, prefer not to give clear and simple information of what they're doing. They prefer to work in a shadow and not inform people of what their intentions are, their plans are, what our strategic goals are. Serbia, for example, never adopted its foreign policy strategy. For those exact reasons, Serbia was to adopt foreign policy strategy, then we would have a National Assembly or Parliament adopted document which would clearly state what is Serbia's direction in foreign policy. This is what Mr. spoke about. We don't know what is Serbia's actual direction and ambition, and that's the goal of political elites for a very long time. The third pillar of spreading information, of course, is what we're all facing in all kinds of information or in media work, and it has to do with the professionalism of media workers, their resistance to negative narratives, misinformation, malinformation, and disinformation campaigns, which is, as it was already mentioned, direct tied to technologies where often it's not even humans who are publishing or picking the audiences, but it's algorithm driven. It's being done without human interference, which makes countering such campaigns much harder and much bigger job, because without also such technologies, it becomes basically impossible. Mr. Rich already established that having professionals, actually meaning humans, who can see those fine differences between what is a negative campaign and what is a positive campaign, it is really hard to let technology drive anti-disinformation campaign. Algorithms and technology is driving disinformation campaigns. Now, the particular case of Western Balkans and Serbia is driven what I stated in the second pillar, and that's political will. I already explained why in this case, specifically, why is Russian influence being so successful? Because it targets soft belly of democracy, and that's a freedom of speech, it's a freedom of idea and sharing those. It actually uses the biggest achievement democratic societies. Yes, Marco, did you want to say something?
No, 2 more minutes, maximum 3.
Okay, this is my end. It is using, and keep it short, it's really simple. It's using the biggest advantage of democratic society for achieving own goals. And it was questioned, what are the goals? What are the goals of negative campaigns of Russia, especially in the West Balkans? It is not actually to even change the opinion of people. It is not to have Albania leave NATO. It is not to create a sort or any significant number of people from Western Balkans which is going to join their war effort in Ukraine. No, it is very simple. It's to create chaos and instability, turning enormous amount of resources and attention of West from its major goals to West Balkans and other areas in the world. In Africa, in Syria, Russia has very concrete goals, very concrete economic, military ambitions and goals. In West Balkans, as we are, again, soft belly of, I'm sorry for using that phrase, but that's the phrase explaining. We are soft belly of Europe. We are being used and abused to create an additional destabilization factor for the European Union and NATO, while Russia Federation is trying to achieve their major goals both in Ukraine and other parts of the world. With this, I will end. I don't want to spend more of your time. I know what I'm saying is not something that is new or unheard of, but that's exactly because it is not hard to understand what's going on. Thank you, and I'm open for any further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Petrovic. I must say that we had a lot of trouble hearing you. I think there's something wrong with the network. Unfortunately, I did understand most of it, but at certain times there were breakups that people were writing me in the chat privately that are they the only one that cannot hear the stream or the audio fluently? And if there is another network that you can connect to for the questions part, okay. If not, then we'll try to manage somehow. Nevertheless, what you said,
I do apologize.
Okay. Nevertheless, what you have said is very interesting, and I will take just one point to make a connection, probably to relate somehow to what you presented. It's interesting how you broke the whole presentation into three major parts. But what is different, and I would also relate to the first presentation by Ms. Dervishi. What is different in all Yugoslav countries, especially maybe in North Macedonia, Serbia, Montenegro, and Bosnia and Herzegovina, and the other countries in Southeast Europe, is that the Yugoslav legacy was the legacy of the non-aligned. So this balancing act between the West and the East was always very popular in this country. I think that many local political elites are trying to build on this, trying to somehow to balance between Russia and NATO, for instance. And this kind of catches on and has very fertile ground. I think that people love this kind of policy that is neither there or here. So basically, I think that the success that you mentioned of the Russian propaganda is maybe a consequence due to this deeply rooted perception that we should be somewhere in between. Even in North Macedonia, after joining NATO, there are huge portions of people that believe this story, so to say. Then again, it's interesting that the relation between Serbia and North Macedonia, when it comes to Russia's influence, the interesting fact is that Russia doesn't have so much direct influence in North Macedonia, but uses Serbia as a proxy very often, and Serbian media to penetrate the Macedonian media space. And it's a very interesting thing to see, very interesting thing to analyze. On the authenticity of pro-Russian sentiment, that's another discussion we will discuss maybe after some of the other presentations. There is a question by Alexander Kostadinov. I will just ask you to be patient. We will listen to the other two presentations, and then we will come back to Mr. Kostadinov's question. Just please note in the questions in the chat or live or whichever way you choose, who are you directing the question to? That's very important. So Mr. Kostadinov, you can, I suppose it's for Mr. Petrovic, but you must be more specific when it, or maybe for all participants. But before we go to questions, we go to the next presentation. Mr. Irvin Pekmez, journalist at Balkan Investigating Reporting Network, BIRN. Bosnia and Herzegovina, from Bosnia and Herzegovina, Russia's disinformation and invasion on Ukraine through lens of Bosnian war and contemporary challenges. Mr. Pekmez, the floor is yours. I think there can be a parallel made between North Macedonia and Bosnia and Herzegovina in terms of polarization, I would say, of society and a different, I would say, populations of society and ethnic divisions and many other analogies that can be made. But still, I want to hear about, and all of us want to hear about, kind of an overview of the situation in Bosnia. So the floor is yours, please.
Thank you for invitation, and thank you organizers for inviting me. I think that you are right. First of all, excuse me, I'm sick, and if I sneeze all of a sudden or something like that, my apologies. I think I have a cold or something. So having more than two, actually 3 or 4 ethnic groups in one country is often a opportunity for a foreign power to create a problem, or even again a fruit from the problem that already exists. And I think that maybe in countries like North Macedonia and Bosnia, it's the case. I'm not the expert on North Macedonia, so I will not comment, but in Bosnia, that's certainly the case. And from my journalistic perspective, I made a couple of 3 or 4 groups of the things that I think that are most important in the sense of what we are seeing on the field, because I'm in the section of Balkan Investigative Reporting Network that is investigating and that is watching the behavior of Russian propaganda and Russian embassy and so on. I don't know who mentioned the embassy before me, but I have something also to say about Russian embassy in Sarajevo. And that is interesting thing, because from the February of 2022, the number of statements, the number of public broadcast or any sort of public connection from the embassy just rose 1,000-fold, because and almost everything through the Facebook, because the Facebook is still the main platform here in Bosnia. And some of the things are the main dish for the communication, and those are negating atrocities committed by Russian army. The negating of atrocities such as massacre in Bucha is very important here in Bosnia, because there are parallels between Bosnian war and the Ukrainian war, and that is something that is being exploited by Russian embassy for more than a year now, year and a half. There is also this narrative when it comes to NATO, because there is also, you know, at least in part of the Bosnian politics, the wish for becoming a part of a NATO alliance. And Russian embassy is often talking about NATO in the sense of Western imperialism, and in the sense of 1999, the bombing of Yugoslavia, and Republika Srpska, which was in the 1995 actually a quasi-state, and now it's a recognized part of Bosnia. Some other things that embassy is often talking about is actually negating of Srebrenica genocide and using the Srebrenica narrative in the context of stirring the situation in Bosnia, or in the sense of again negating certain atrocities in Ukraine and making creating a parallel between those things in the sense that they are both fabricated in the eyes of Kremlin government nowadays. There is a certain role in statements which is actually aimed at Muslim population in Bosnia, because Russian perceives itself and marketing itself to the Bosnian public as some sort of protector of religious freedoms, because there is a large Muslim population in Russia, and Russian embassy is often using this as an example of how it should be, how one state or one system should be behaving towards a certain religious communities, and using this summer events in Sweden with the burning of Quran and those kind of things, and claiming that in Russia that would never happen, and so on. Balkan Investigative Reporting Network also is watching the TV production in Russia, and we actually investigated one particular program which is broadcasted in Russia Today Balkans, and it's available online. And that program used actually this parallel at the time talking about in the sense of West fabricating certain incidents and using them as a ground for political decisions, such as, again, massacres in Sarajevo, such as Markale massacre that happened during the 19th war, Srebrenica genocide, atrocities in Ukraine, and so on. Russia is, in the sense that I can guess, is very interested in making even more polarization between Serbian and Bosniak population when it comes to the nature of Bosnian war itself, and making even more points of breaking apart the two communities that hold the Bosnian states together. Those documentaries are often populated by talking heads that speak Serbian language, and it's very easy to consume in Bosnia and Serbia and surrounding states. Because of the time, I'm going to skip some things that I was willing to say, but we can talk about it during other times. So let me just say that when it comes to communication with journalists, when the media, Russian embassy is very strict. I, for instance, tried to communicate with Russian embassy at least 20 times in the last 2 years, and never got any answer or willingness to talk to me in the sense of investigating certain aspects of Bosnian society that is very important in the Russian politics, foreign politics. But in the same time, Russia is very open to certain set of media from the Republika Srpska, such as Republika Srpska TV or alternative television. That's the name of the TV, alternative television, and the paper that is called Glas Srpske. There are actually a couple of things that happened in the last half year. The Russian ambassador himself awarded some of the journalists that are actually promoting the Russian narrative about the war. The very big names from Russian Federation in the journalistic sense came to Bosnia and gave awards to those journalists that were actually on the front line in the Donbass, let's say, and who were actually active participants in the referendum when it was happening, when the certain parts of Russia, Ukraine seceded from they claim that they seceded from Ukraine and became a part of Russian Federation. So there is actually not even a passive; it's active wall building for certain media in Bosnia, and active embracement of the media that are actually saying things that are written inside the Kremlin. So yeah, I will stop here, and I hope that I can expand on everything that I said. There is actually two more things that I would love to say, but maybe I will get the chance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pekmez. It's really interesting to hear the Bosnian context. Get well, by the way. Get well. Basically, all three presentations had one, I would say, connecting point, especially to your presentation, Mr. Pekmez. I wanted to answer. We did a very nice job in the 90s polarizing societies ethnically and religiously, and on any given possible account and ground. And I think that Russia has just to build on that. So basically effectively use the polarization, especially in Bosnia and North Macedonia, recently in Montenegro and Kosovo, to kind of build on that and to utilize them, because their previous strategy fell apart. And the previous strategy of Russia, geopolitical strategy, was that Bosnia and Herzegovina, Serbia, Montenegro and North Macedonia never enter NATO and serve as kind of a buffer zone between Russia and NATO, and this plan was obviously completely failed apart. 2 out of 4 of these countries are now in NATO. Serbia won't be anytime soon, probably, as things are going by. And Bosnia is quite divided on the question, but paralyzed politically because of the specific political context and post-Dayton, I would say, political engineering of the country. So let's wrap it up so we can have more time, not just for your the 2 points that you missed, but maybe the questions that are already coming in the chat. Our fourth speaker is Mr. Marko Banovic from the Digital Forensic Center of the Atlantic Council of Montenegro, Russian propaganda channels in Montenegro. Mr. Banovic, the floor is yours, and then we can we'll have enough time, at least 20 minutes, for a debate and say what we did not say in our presentation. Mr. Banovic, please.
Thank you very much, Professor Markovic, and thank you for the organizers for inviting me and for holding this discussion on a very important issue, such as disinformation and propaganda coming from Russian Federation. As you know, Montenegro has been a long time a target of Russian disinformation campaigns, and these campaigns has intensified since Montenegro joined NATO. So there's a clear correlation between these processes. Currently, Montenegro is a very divided country, very polarized country, and the political situation isn't very stable. And this is a perfect opportunity for Russia to continue its hybrid threats, to continue its hybrid war, and to spread disinformation and propaganda, which will further divide Montenegrin citizens and unfortunately stop our accessions towards the EU. Now, in regard of the Ukrainian war, Russia is acting directly through its embassy, but also indirectly through its proxies. Those proxies are both in Serbia and in Montenegro. And Russia, through time, has built a strong network of its proxies. And they're covering all bases. They're covering religious organizations, they're covering political organizations, NGOs, cultural organizations, media, and now we have a rise of the far-right extremist groups in Montenegro, which are supporting Russia and promoting pro-Russian narratives. So this has been, we've seen since the start of the war that that these proxies are synchronized, they are acting in cohesion, and they're spreading the same narratives. When the war started, we had the similar narratives that we had in Sputnik and RT, which is that this is a special military operations for the denazification of Ukraine. However, that narrative didn't gain much traction in Montenegro, so they switched it. The new narrative was that NATO and EU and America were to blame for the war in Ukraine. They're the one that have been provoking Russia, and Russia just had to act. And these narratives really hit the point, because all anti-Western actors in the country and in the region accepted that narrative and started spreading. This is a part of the narrative that already existed in Montenegro, but in the wider Western Balkan region. And the narrative also claims that the West is trying to divide Slavic nations, Slavic people, and try to draw a wedge between them. And all these proxies caught on it. They continue to spread even today. And unfortunately, the lack of strong institutions in Montenegro is enabling Russia to dominate the information system in our country. Now, regarding these proxies, I have to highlight the importance of the Serbian Orthodox Church. It's the key and vital actor for Russia in Montenegro, because this is an institution which for the past decade has the most trust from Montenegrin citizens. And that has been proven by the public opinion polls. And Russia is clearly trying to take advantage of that. Additionally, you have a leader of Serbian Orthodox Church in Montenegro, who in 2022 went to Moscow and held a service with Russian Patriarch Kirill, and they prayed for the Russian people. And Serbian Orthodox Church is providing an ideological foundation for all the other pro-Serbian and pro-Russian actors in Montenegro. The second important actor or proxy are political parties, which have a strong pro-Serbian and pro-Russian stance for a long time period. However, since the start of the war, they haven't been very vocal. They try to position themselves as neutral, and those are the narratives that they spread, but we all know what neutrality means in this situation. So the next thing, we have these far-right extremist groups, which have been founded with and under the wing of Serbian Orthodox Church. These are religious brotherhoods which are spreading Russian narratives, which have been organizing several protests as a support of Russian aggression. And this is very strange, because at the same time in Montenegro, and the same day, we had a protest of support on Cetinje towards Ukraine and Ukrainian people. And at the same time in Podgorica, we have a support of Russian aggression by these far-right extremist groups. Also, these far-right extremist groups are connected with the Russian far-right extremist groups, such as Night Wolves and Cossacks Army, which have their branches in Montenegro. And all these actions are supported by the media ecosystem we have in Montenegro. Now, there are 2 points regarding propaganda and disinformation through media in Montenegro. The first one is a lot of disinformations are coming from Serbia, because there's no language barrier. There's a high volume of readers of Serbian tabloids, of Serbian national television in Montenegro. So they're trying to exploit the control of those media outlets in Serbia to spread the same narratives. Of course, there are both Sputnik Serbia and RT Balkan, which, of course, we know they are propaganda channels for Russia, and especially have been active since the war started. Now, when it comes to Montenegro, we do not have Russian media outlets registered in Montenegro. However, we have our own pro-Russian media. Info-Res is an online media outlet which has been operating for more than a decade. They were strongly against Montenegro joining NATO. They were always supporting Putin and his regime, and they're always supporting Serbian regime of Aleksandar Vučić. So they're not registered in Montenegro, they're registered in Cuba, and unfortunately, weak Montenegro institutions do not have the means to act and to sanctions hate speech that is coming from that outlet, propaganda that is coming from that outlet, and we just have to deal with this issue. They had InfoRes have their own journalists traveling with Russian army in Donbass. He was live reporting from the war, and now when he came back to Montenegro, he created a movie which is now broadcasting in cinemas across the Montenegro, which is spreading Russian narratives, and they're trying to reach more and more people and to simply change the minds, change the pure pro-European stance of Montenegrin citizens. And this is just a brief introduction, and I hope we'll have more discussion regarding these issues. But just to conclude, this is all possible because for a long period of time, Montenegro didn't have strong institutions. There's, of course, a strong polarization, but we need strong institutions and political will to deal with foreign malign influence. And unfortunately, that is something that Montenegro has been lacking for a long period of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Banovic. You're very much to the point, not trying to kind of use euphemisms in the whole situations, very much, very concrete in the presentation. It's interesting you mentioned the church, and in our situation in North Macedonia, I don't think that the church is involved, which is kind of weird. I would say it's awkward a bit, but then again, it's not so much. I discussed with certain people from the Faculty of Theology that are my colleagues, the colleague professors, and it has kind of a reasonable explanation why the church in Macedonia was never utilized for such a operation, I would say, of kind of proxy spreading the influence through proxies. It's fundamentally because it was newly recognized by all the other Orthodox churches. It got an equal status to other churches. And the short answer is they simply don't want to rock the boat. So we all know, and probably Aphrodita can confirm, it's a situation that is very well known that in the Macedonian Orthodox Church, there are two big influences. It's the Russian influence and the Greek influence, which are combating within, I would say, through different figures and different discourses that you can find in the public. But it's probably the common consensus of all currents and factions within the Macedonian Orthodox Church to simply not rock the boat and simply let the situation stabilize after the recognition. And because of that reason, the church has not been effectively utilized until now. What happens now? We'll see one of the archbishops and one of the most important people in the Macedonian Orthodox Church open the private TV. So maybe we'll see where that goes. We don't know what the program of the TV station will be. I have no accusation to make until this point, but I would be certainly aware to how it will be utilized. Now that we have all the information on the whole region, we can open up the discussion. I think we had a question. Yes, Mr. Kostadinov asked, can someone comment how the Russian government list of unfriended countries affects Western Balkan countries? Because can someone comment indicates that anybody can answer the question. I will open the floor for everybody. Whomever wants to take the floor can answer the question of Mr. Kostadinov. Is there anybody directly interested to answer this list of unfriended countries dilemma? Irvin, please.
Yeah, this actually connects to something that I didn't have this chance to say, because a list of unfriendly countries, for instance, Bosnia is not on that list. We are, in the eyes of Moscow, still a very friendly country to them. But we can see that even when we are a friendly country, there is actually a lot going on, and we can be considered even unfriendly by those standards of Russian propaganda pushing its goals on the population here. There is interesting thing that happened maybe a couple of weeks ago. The two members of presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina went to the Kiev and met with Zelensky. So that was a reason for the Russian embassy here in Sarajevo to publish a statement, again, on its Facebook page, with the statement claiming that that action of them being in Kiev in the time when there was this meeting, I'm not sure what it's called now, I can't remember, but that's the some sort of association or a project that Russia is considered that Russia considers to be unfriendly and enemy-like. So that kind of visit to Kiev was enemy act by the two members of presidency. And if you don't know, the president of Bosnia and Herzegovina is actually three persons, one Serb, one Bosniak, and one Croat. And Bosniak and Croat went to the Kiev, and Serb stayed here in Bosnia. And embassy considered that trip an act of unfriendliness, to say. So yeah, being on the list of unfriendly countries is, at least by my point of view from Bosnia, not so important. Yeah, that's actually what my input.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to address the question?
Yeah, if I may.
Yes, please.
As the one who posed the question, actually, the threat from Russia is real, and it's the retaliation actually happened. I won't say that in case of media that there are happenings, Russian meddling in case of North Macedonia, but in case of unfriendly list of countries, it is a real threat. It actually heavily affected North Macedonia. And how it happened? Actually, after the sanctions imposed by the EU, Montenegro has joined those sanctions and aligned with the EU common foreign and security policy. This in turn, Russian government started to create and curate a so-called list of unfriendly countries, in which, as Irvin mentioned, Bosnia is not on that list, and Serbia are the two countries from the Western Balkans are not on that list. The other four are on the list. The other four are called the Quad countries, and they have committed to be aligned with there is Montenegro, North Macedonia, Kosovo, and Albania to be aligned with the European common foreign and security policy. As a result of this unfriendly list of countries, North Macedonia and other EU countries received often a marketplace of natural gas prices. And this was investigated in our latest statistical bulletin at EDE. And we found that Russia actually sifted these blocks like unfriendly and friendly countries, where Bosnia and Serbia got 3 times lower prices for natural gas than North Macedonia. In 2022 or last year, Macedonian citizens paid more than 200 euros as a result of increased prices. While Serbia, and you can find everything in this the statistical brief that we have prepared. On another case, Kosovo and Montenegro is totally disconnected from Russian meddling, and Albania managed to divert the gas importation from Azerbaijan. So they got protected, and they are not affected heavily as we are. These citizens in North Macedonia are aware that if the inflation rose to the highest possible, I mean, the highest in the region, 14% last year, and affected heavily the state budget. I mean, all those money that were planned for capital investments and reconstruction infrastructure was spent on subsidies to the citizens because of the businesses and the citizens couldn't pay their bills if the market price were applied. So I wouldn't say that this measure is just saying like they don't have influence. They do have. It actually created havoc in North Macedonian economy. It was affected, especially in the fuels. And we actually in 2022 imported more from Russia than the 3 previous years together. So we imported like 420 million euros. In the previous 3 years, it was imported around 400 million euros, just like a summary of the amount of importation from Russia. Yeah, so this is my comment, and
Okay.
I would like to pay attention, to make analysis, and to be before jumping into political decisions, and also that the journalists should be aware of such consequences. I mean, database, as the NATO representative mentioned, we need data, we need good data, and also we need analysis before jumping into conclusions and fighting disinformation, because only this way we can stand on the ground, and the media can, I mean, provide fact-based results and provide correct information.
Thank you, Mr. Kostadinov. I would like to add something on your point. I'm a host of a podcast which is political, and I had one of the most prominent, if not the most prominent, professor of energy from MANU, from the Macedonian Academy of Arts and Sciences, Professor Natasha Markovska, as a guest. And she said one very truthful sentence, that the most expensive resource is the one that you are being blackmailed with. So that has no price, unfortunately, and that is the most expensive resource. We are all aware of the economic harm that is being done, and it won't stop anytime soon. I don't think that the situation is going to get better overnight. For the next winter, probably we'll be more prepared, which doesn't mean that we will not have losses, but this is something that goes along with the situation as it is. I don't think we can avoid it effectively at this point. We can try to counteract against that, but not completely avoid the damages that are going to be done. But I do agree with Professor Markovska that the most expensive resource is the one, or source of energy is the one that you are being blackmailed with. That's a situation that you really don't need. Ms. Dervishi, you have an intervention, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Professor. A very short intervention in connection to the remark that the colleague made very clearly, which I agree with. We should consider that in order to counter this disinformation, at least very lately, there has been approved a very huge, large amount of billions of euro of help, of package from the West, from the European Union. And unfortunately, for example, in the case of Serbia, in order to align Serbia's foreign policy with that of the European Union, there has been given to Serbia a EU energy support of 165 million only in February this year, in order to help, let's say, small, medium enterprises in Serbia. That means that countries like North Macedonia or other countries that might have, let's say, had an economic impact after being put in the unfriendly list of Russia, let's say that this is a very good and positive side from the European Union that is trying to help to support the European integration of the Western Balkans countries. This, unfortunately, is not functioning when we talk about Serbia, which is, of course, highly dependent on energy security from Russia, and EU is showing its own, let's say, way of supporting Serbia, and yet we don't see a clear-cut foreign policy alignment with the European Union from Serbia. And that's a pity to observe, and this is fact, this is not, let's say, just information to be delivered. But we really hope that when I say we, I mean a lot of professionals, we really were interested, and we were thinking that there had arrived the time for Serbia in order also to influence that part of Republika Srpska in Bosnia and Herzegovina, so that the Euro-Atlantic integration, based also on the Berlin process that is undergoing, and you know that in October, Tirana will be the host of the Berlin process here in Albania, would take concrete measures and advantages in order to have Western Balkans compacted. And this is a very important sign, but unfortunately, we are seeing that this has not been received from Serbia. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have okay. We have the link of Mr. Kostadinov on the research in the chat. Whomever wants to, I will immediately try to open it. Okay, so it works. Western Balkan and Russia assessing the trade impact of sanctions. Okay, that's good to know and to have as information, of course. Any other interventions, questions? Maybe if some of the participants want to finish with their points. Nikola Petrovic, please.
Thank you. Back to what Ms. Dervishi said, and Serbia's alignment with Ukraine security, it has been traditionally very low. It has low in all the areas that are Russia considers its area of influence. Serbian political elites did not align with those foreign policy measures directed directly towards the Russian Federation, but also to those countries that are considered by Russia Russian sphere of influence, showing very clearly that the Serbian political elite, when it comes to foreign policy, is actually consulting the Russian Federation in one way or another before joining any EU foreign tools, which shows the level of influence Russia Federation politics has on a Serbian political. In turn, of course, explain why, as colleague from Montenegro, he claims, and I agree with that, that the Serbian Orthodox Church is a very important pillar of stability in Montenegro. But in mind, the Serbian Orthodox Church is basically government-controlled institution in Serbia. Very simple. They see their salaries from the, even though we're a secular country, Serbian Orthodox Church is huge percentage of them from the government budget. And then you have full circle, where Russian nation has basically their line of influence on multiple structure in Western Balkans through Serbian political elites. That's all I wanted to add.
Thank you. I think since we're finishing in 2 minutes, we have time, if I read the agenda right. Yes, we have maybe time for one more intervention or question, and then we can slowly wrap up the session. So please, if anybody has a question or a comment, Ms. Dervishi, please, we'll finish with you.
No, I'll try to be short so that any other colleague can intervene. We should consider also that the regional barometer that was delivered from the Regional Cooperation Council very shortly still considers that a very high percentage of the Western Balkans population still support the Euro-Atlantic integration of the Western Balkans. And this means that since we have that kind of support, let's say that there is hope that disinformation can be countered, and at the same time we have also time to improve the tools with, and in this case I mean EU institutions, but also national security institutions, in order to counter disinformation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, one more maybe, since we have 1 more minute to 2 minutes. Anybody wants to make pose a question or make a comment? Out of the participants, I see we have 25 participants still in the session, so, or should we slowly wrap up? Okay, then if there are no questions anymore, or comments or interventions for the time being, I will give back the floor to Ms. Afrodita Musliu to close the session. I thank you in my personal name, in the name of the organizers, of course. It was a very interesting debate for me, very new information, and now I can see the regional context, all the similarities and dissimilarities with North Macedonia. See all around, I go around the region pretty often, so I think you cannot avoid meeting me somewhere, probably in Sarajevo or Pristina or Belgrade or Podgorica, and hope to meet you in person. Ms. Musliu, please, you have the honor to close the session.
Thank you very much, Mr. Markovic, Professor Markovic, and thank you to all panelists for this great panel discussion. As I mentioned at the beginning, that we have made a very fruitful debate, and I can agree with Professor Markovic that we saw the similarities and differences between the Western Balkan countries regarding the Russian propaganda. We stay in touch. Thank you very much for the guests who were all the time with us. There were around 30, and most of them were until the end of this meeting, which agree on this, that this panel discussion was a success. Thank you very much again, and see you in some other place. Thank you. Bye. Bye, everyone.